Let's see. Welcome to everybody from Wenham, and thank you for joining us tonight. We'll go ahead and get started with our joint Town of Hamilton Board of Selectmen and Town of Wenham Board of Selectmen.
Both boards should do a roll call. Jeff, you might want to have both boards do a roll call real quick. Again.
In terms of attendance?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Why don't we start off with Hamilton? Bill?
William Olson here.
Sean?
Sean Farrell present.
Darcy?
You can unmute yourself there, Darcy.
Okay, wait a minute. I got to find it.
You got it. We got you now.
Okay, Darcy Dale here.
Great. Rosie?
I think she's muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
You got
Rosie
it.
Kennedy here.
All right. Great. Jeff Hubbard here. We'll
Okay.
head over to Wenham.
This is Jack Wilhelm, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Wenham. Obviously, I'm present. Catherine, you want to say hi?
Hi, Catherine Harrison, present as well.
John Clemency? John Clemency?
John was
I
still trying to call in, Jack, so he should be in a few minutes.
Anyway, Catherine and I are here and present, and we constitute the majority of the board, so let's go.
Hey, Jack, I'm not sure what's going on with your microphone, but it's hard to hear you.
Say it again.
I'm not, there's something going on with your microphone. There's a lot of feedback and it's a little bit hard to hear you.
How about now?
Same.
Sorry.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Did you do your roll call?
Everybody, he did his roll call.
There's no quorum.
Yes, we have quorum.
Quorum, they have 2 out of 3.
Ah,
They have 2 out of 3, so they have their quorum. Does somebody, Jeff, go ahead. You and Jack can lead the meeting. Your meeting.
All right. Well, I guess we'll just get right to the agenda here. And I guess the first discussion is talking about rescheduling the town meeting and town elections. I don't know, Joe and Anthony, if the way I think we left it is to not determine a date until we had further information so that we didn't have to postpone it again.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, this is Anthony. That's correct. The only thing that we really have to discuss is because Mass General Law still now requires us to have an annual election by June 30th, as they hadn't changed or modified that yet. So right now, as Joe and I was speaking about this, that if we get a save the date and maybe used Thursday, the 25th of June, is that right?
Yeah, Thursday the 25th for the election, and
the 20th would be town meetings.
Essentially for town meeting.
Followed by Wenham. So, neither board would take a vote on it, so we don't start the clock running, but it's kind of a save the date if that sounds like a plan to both boards.
It seems to make sense to me. Hamilton, do you have any comments on that? Unmute Rosie, sure.
There. So my comment is, what does a save the date mean? Does it mean that we are scheduling these 2 events, or that we're just hoping to schedule these 2 events on those days? Just wondering.
yeah, I think it means that we're hoping to schedule the 2 events, and kind of gives us a guidepost to at least have something to aim for. Right now, we're kind of just drifting and waiting. Certainly, if the governor comes out in the next week or so, or 3 weeks even, and says, hey, we're going to close the schools all the way through the end of the year and we're not expecting anything to happen before July 1st, that might cause you to change your mind. So you don't want to take a vote tonight and start the clock, as Anthony said, as far as preparing for town meeting. But you're going to have to probably do an election anyway, unless they take up new legislation to change that, and they haven't yet. And so to just at least get us thinking about these things, it might be helpful. Just wanted to put it in front of you to have you share your thoughts on it.
I'm fine with saving the date. I think that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Everything's so up in the air.
It is, very much.
How would we get that out? Would we do a mailing or just post it online, or?
I think we could probably, I wouldn't do a mailing. I mean, mailing would be expensive, and since we may not since we may not definitely go with that date, since things could still change, I would use the town website, social media, things like that to say, hey, the town is gearing up to try for a town meeting potentially on June 20th and have the town election to June 25th, save the date. Or,
Joe,
make
Joe,
arrangements to do your over-the-counter voting in time for an election later on. So, yeah.
Joe, do you want to do a press release, joint press release? I'm happy to coordinate that with.
Jack Will, I don't want to do a
Sure.
press release yet. We're just having a discussion tonight. And that, I think that a press release about save the date is premature at this point.
What do you suggest, Mr. Wilhelm? Hello?
Jack is fine.
Okay.
This is a discussion. I've had several emails from constituents urging us to have elections sooner rather than later, and the annual town meeting whenever, so that I think penciling in a date for our own discussion purposes a month from now is desirable, but announcing it to the public, because people are going to put that in the calendars and say, oh, there it is. And they're not going to say this is just a tentative date. They're going to assume this is a real date. That's my concern.
Oh, that was my question.
Well, we also have a bylaw that once the town meeting takes place, the election must take place 5 days later. So are you suggesting that there would be a greater number of days between the town meeting and the election?
We can have elections at different dates. We don't have any such bylaw in town of Wenham.
Oh, well,
So
then there's a problem. We're going to have to work together to make sure that we're in coordination, right?
That would be highly desirable, but not mandatory. Yes.
Okay. So I guess we'll just be discussing what Hamilton is going to do at this point.
Well, Joe, with our tie with ATM and elections,
Yep.
is there anything we could modify to kind of Jack's point of having elections and no ATM with the circumstances we're in?
So normally, because, normally in order to modify a bylaw, we'd have to either get a special act or have an action by town meetings. Since this is related to the date of the town meeting, we can't do either of those things. So there's no a ready solution for us to be able to, kind of fix what's in our bylaws and allow us to do them at different times.
Yep.
Right. So
I know that there is some talk that the governor may, add in legislation that would deal with the town elections, the spring elections for towns. But as I said, that hasn't been done yet. And, the last time he recommended something, it took nearly 3 weeks for it to be executed. So I'm getting a little concerned as we get into May that we'll have a remedy that we can work with. We may have to follow state law and have the town election before the end of June, and then just wait on town meeting, and it'll be a little bit different. But I prefer that we follow state law and get the state to forgive us on the bylaw infraction later on.
Right.
So Joe, we should probably just go ahead the way Hamilton has been operating in the past, rather than try to change anything at this point.
Yep.
Thank you.
And this is Catherine. Hi, everyone. I don't think we have, at this point, with information changing all the time, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to be thinking about a save the date for June 20th and June 25th. Those allow the Saturday town meeting and the Thursday election. It would work for both towns. It's tentative, as everything is right now. But I think that's kind of a reasonable approach with the information we have now. Since it's maybe a little bit more complicated in Wenham, since at our election, in addition to a couple of people, we have 4 or 5 ballot questions, 2 operating overrides. So our budget is very much tied to, the election.
Yep.
So I would recommend for this discussion that we just go ahead with but keep the 20th and the 25th as save the dates, and conform as the state tells us to in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think to Catherine's point and Jack's earlier comment on it, I don't think we need to run out tomorrow and say save the date, everybody. what I think is the two groups kind of talk tonight. We can kind of use that save the date, and then as we get a little bit closer and things develop, then we can issue a press release as we get a little bit closer, 30 days out or something like that, or whatever we decide. I don't think we need to run out tomorrow and do it. And I think Jack's point of the kind of confusion is relevant. But I also think putting something in the calendar would be good as kind of a marker for us to kind of move forward to get to, and hopefully things will kind of clear up a little bit before then, and some confidence will come back and some gatherings, and we'll be able to have it and move on with our budgets and elections.
Just to add a little bit to the thing, with the election too, I've spoken a little bit with our interim town clerk about the having an election, even if we don't have town meeting and things like that. She did say that whenever the date is chosen for the town election, she'll be doing everything she can to try to convince people to vote, to do early voting and to do over-the-counter voting. Absentee ballot. That's not really what absentee ballots are supposed to be used for, but it certainly can be. It isn't really questioned. You just go in and tell them you need to vote early, and they send you the ballot. So that would cut down on the number of people that need to be at the polling place potentially on election day, and the number of poll workers that you'd need and things like that. So if the state doesn't allow us any relief and we have to move forward with election date, we'll try to get as many people as possible to vote through the mail.
Yeah, we have Bill Bowler online, our moderator. And Bill, do you have any comments on save the date for the 20th of June and the 25th for elections?
Well, I'm on a Google group for moderators, and people are talking about this. A lot of towns are planning for things in June. Some towns are, they're just kicking it around, like having town meeting outdoors, like in the football field or something.
That's interesting.
I like that.
Is maybe something to consider. I guess so. Yeah, towns are talking about it pretty, some more concretely than others. A couple of towns that even have still have drive-in movies, or having going to have town meeting talking about having town meeting at the drive-in movie. I won't.
That's creative.
There's
That
a lot
is a really good idea.
there, but I won't go there. I guess the one thing I would say, I know everything that's on the warrant in a town meeting is important, but if we're planning something that's not going to be like our usual town meeting in some fashion, then I would think it would behoove us to move some of the items to a fall town meeting and just deal with the things that really need to be dealt with. So that's
essential.
Makes sense.
right.
I would think, Joe, if to Bill's point, maybe we at our next agenda, or as we get a little bit closer, look at some of our warrant items and see what we can kind of separate and key as essential things, and then stuff we can push to fall town meeting.
Yeah, certainly things like, things we'll be looking at anyway due to the fiscal constraints and the concerns about having to adjust the budget, are things like the capital budget, or the capital items. And so if we take that out, that's one whole article that goes away and doesn't have to be discussed. So yeah, we'll be looking. Yeah, we should be looking at all that stuff, and we'll definitely be asking Board of Selectmen and FinCom for input into how to make those choices. So thank you.
Okay. Ready to move on to the next topic? Discussion of fiscal year 20 budget impacts on COVID-19 response and what it means for the upcoming operations of this year, and discussion of joint programs.
Jack, well, I'm very, very interested in understanding what you're evaluating and what you're doing, if anything.
Can I recognize Marissa? I know she's on here somewhere. Marissa, and with the help of the department heads, has already undertaken kind of an analysis of our townwide, our departmental budgets, and identified line items where we think that we can try to avoid spending between now and the end of the fiscal year. And we've made some estimates based on, and I'll let her do this because she does this part of the things better than I do by far. But she's made some estimates on what the potential revenue reduction could be based on a percentage of compliance with property taxes and things like that. And we think that we'll be able to balance even if we come in a little bit short of collections based on the items that we have identified as being able to not be spent in the current fiscal year. Marissa, you on?
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. We're hoping that we'll be able to balance our budget with some of the savings that we have asked department heads to identify areas where there could potentially not spend those funds or try to hold off for a couple of months for some of those expenditures. So we asked the department heads for a list of essential purchases, and we're trying to get some of the savings that way. I have done our preliminary third quarter report, which didn't show much of a change for the FY20. The concern is how we're going to end up with the fourth quarter. We have extended our taxes due date to June 1st, so it's not going to be till year end. We're going to know how our collections are going to end up. We're hoping that even if we have, I looked back to 2008 and 2009, and we're hoping that even if we have a collection rate lower than it normally is, still be able to balance FY20 with some of the savings that we're looking to find in our FY20 budgets.
Jack, well, I have a question. Do you have a targeted amount of money, or is it just open-ended, or do you have, is it 50,000 or 200,000? Is there a goal at all?
Right now, we're actually looking at about 500,000, and that's just based on the estimates because of the decrease in revenue collections. Our permits are down. I just tried to the best of my ability to forecast what our fourth quarter collections would be. The difficult part is to forecast what our real estate collections are going to be. And since those are not going to be due until June 1st, that makes it a little difficult. I just use that if we were to collect 92% of our real estate taxes for fiscal year 20, then we would have about, based on all the estimates, we would have a shortfall of about $500,000. And that's what we're trying to find in our budget. But again, these are all preliminary numbers. We're just, trying to be conservative, trying to plan ahead and do the best.
This is Jack Willen again. If we had a 10% shortfall in our real estate tax collections for the fourth quarter, it would have a negative impact of 462,000 in Wenham. So that I'm surprised that Hamilton's a lot larger than Wenham. I'm surprised that they're that close.
It might not be. Like I said, I used 92%, but that's very, very conservative. Even back in 2008 and 2009, we did not have a collection rate of 92%. So that number could be low. It's just, we're probably going to be changing it in the next couple of years as more information is available. And I think this is actually changing not even on a weekly basis, almost on a daily basis. Again, that I'm trying to predict for, worst case scenario at this point, but I have no way of knowing.
If I could just restate what Marissa said in a slightly different way. When we started worrying about this 4 or 5 weeks ago, I asked Marissa to take a look at what our collection rate had been at the 2008-2009 timeframe. Typically, Hamilton's collection rate for taxes is around 98+%. There was about a 2% decrease in 2008-2009 to get you down to around 96-95%. So projecting a 92% decrease is well lower than that as well. It's more than double what happened back then. So I endorse this kind of conservative approach and trying to get us to that $500,000 number to try to feel like we'll be able to close comfortably. But I just wanted you to be aware of kind of what the percentages we're talking about. It's 92%. It would be a very, very low collection rate for Hamilton. So.
Well, we have the same concern.
Okay. Discussion of joint programs. I've received several emails. It sounds as though you all have discussed some of the joint programs and funding of those. The emails I've received have been about the library and concerns about furloughing employees there. I don't know, Wenham, I know you're in a little bit different situation than we are, but what your thoughts are on furloughing employees that are in our joint programs.
Jack Willem again, that we haven't decided anything. We just, at our last Board of Selectmen meeting a week ago, we just tasked our town administrator, Anthony Ansaldi, with looking at all of our departments, much the same as I heard a few minutes ago from Marissa, and that where could we save money this year? And so I'm concerned that in addition to the shortfall, a possible shortfall of what I just said a minute ago, of 10% of $462,000, I'm anticipating at the annual town meeting, people are going to say, hey, what did you do to save money during this great shutdown? And so I'm hoping we can come up with reasonable expense reduction proposals, although we haven't really done anything at this point other than tasking Anthony to come up with some proposals for us to consider at subsequent meetings. And that, so that's all we've done so far, which is talk about it.
Is furloughing employees on the table for you all?
Well, we haven't decided exactly whether we're going to furlough anybody. I think the joint library is already, the director of the joint library already let go all of her part-time, either furlough or whatever, part-time employees. She did this at her own discretion. And that, but otherwise we haven't given any instructions about furloughing anybody at this point. But I'd be interested in your thoughts for Hamilton.
May I say, have you looked at places where you can save, like in your trash policy, pay as you throw, so you could use that money for other things? Have you also considered perhaps a hybrid police department that could be a regionalized type situation? Maybe combining some resources with Hamilton and Wenham under one umbrella? Is that something that you would consider? My concern is that we have some of these joint programs, and I think that's the way to go. I think rather than, what's the word? Say we have a joint library, I think that's really important that we keep that. And I think if you can find other ways to save rather than, destroying our library system or other joint areas of that where we have joined forces to create something really good. Can you look at other things? For example, are there ways in your DPW that you could look for savings as well, instead of going right to the joint programs?
We haven't, again, it was only last week we asked Anthony Ansaldi, this is the third time I'm saying this now, to look at anything he thinks would be viable to reduce expenses, including joint programs with the town of Hamilton, whether it's trash, there's nothing specific that we're evaluating right now. And we're waiting for Anthony to come back at a subsequent meeting to say, this is what I recommend.
Yep.
after consulting with the town of Hamilton about joint this or joint that, or other things like that. And so the Board of Selectmen is waiting for Anthony to make his recommendations to us.
Okay.
So Joe, I mean, Joe, what should we consider? I mean, have you guys have already talked offline on this thing. So anything we should consider now before we sort of
So, I mean,
recommendation? We should give the recommendation.
so I think that, what we've been trying, one of the things we've been trying to keep in mind from an administrative standpoint and from talking to my peers around the North Shore, we've been on, 15 different calls in the last 3 weeks. And this is a health crisis that's causing a financial crisis. And our goal here, I think, is most of us around the North Shore, our goal is to get to the end of the fiscal year and try to hold our employees harmless. We understand there may need to be some changes in FY21, but if we can get at least through the end of this year, we can try to prepare them for that and not create a bigger problem amidst a pandemic than needs to be created. We've got the money, for the most part, in our budget. We've got the money to be able to pay our employees. We don't want to hurt them more. If we put them on unemployment, now they have to go to COBRA, so that's more money they have to pay out of pocket. You don't get that much of a savings through unemployment. You have to lay off 2 to get the savings of 1. Those are drastic measures that we don't feel have to be followed right now. So I'm not going to be making those kind of recommendations to you guys here in Hamilton. We will be making recommendations that look into things going forward. We will be looking at stuff in FY21, and we talked very openly with department heads about having those individual meetings and sitting down with them and talking about how can we make things operate a little bit better. They already did that when we did the original FY21 budget, but we tipped them off this morning, and we're going to go back with a sharpened pencils and try to do some more of that. But we really don't see how laying people off amidst a health pandemic actually helps the situation. We actually think it just exacerbates it. So we want to get to the end of the fiscal year, and that gives us another 10 weeks to be able to plan for these things. And we feel that's in the best interest of our employees and in providing services to the town. We've been, Rosie said it earlier in the earlier meeting, our people are still working. Sometimes they're working from home, sometimes they're working by their phone, but we're still working. They're still working to serve the people of Hamilton. So we're not trying to hurt them right now. That's my recommendation.
Joe, I agree with you on that we should try to maybe cut some capital expenses way before we think about cutting personnel. And I also agree with Darcy that our libraries is vital. And I've never seen an overabundance of people there. And that probably would not be my first thought to cut.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Anybody have anything else on that topic? All right, I guess we'll just continue to stay in touch with
Actually, Jeff, may I just suggest that I would be very interested in hearing what the Wenham Finance and Advisory Committee would have to say on this topic. They're a critical voice that needs to be heard. So I would be very interested to hear what the Wenham FinCom also has to say.
Well, this is Jack Wellen again. The Wenham FinCom met. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The Wenham FinCom did meet last week. Anthony was there. I was not there. And obviously they're just like your town. They're responsible for presenting the fiscal 2021 budget, but also opining on anything in fiscal 2020. I understand that they had a discussion, but there was no subsequent recommendations from them to us. But I'd like Anthony to elaborate on that, if you would, please.
Sure, thanks, Jack. Yeah, they met. I went over the whole what's been going on here in town. We got to the pandemic. We discussed FY21. We didn't have a lot of time to do this, so it was really the overview. They met for about an hour, and I spoke for most of that hour, and they're gonna convene another meeting on Wednesday. So now that they have all the facts and some time on Wednesday, that they can further deliberate and offer up some recommendations or comments.
Okay.
If I can ask another question to Jack and Catherine and Anthony, have you guys already approved your upcoming budget, or are you still kind of fine tuning stuff now that you have a little bit more kind of time and things to look at?
Oh, I don't know about the town of Hamilton, but in town of Wenham, it's the Finance and Advisory Committee's recommendation to the town. And so that the Finance and Advisory Committee can recommend on various warrant articles, and they have. And for many of the ones from the Board of Selectmen, we have yet to vote. There's some dogs in the background there. We have yet to vote on our Board of Selectmen recommendation on the articles for fiscal 2021, particularly the override articles. We have several override articles. Obviously, the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District is huge, and that we have a school override, a town override, and a couple of school overrides actually. So no, we haven't opined on that yet, and we haven't really met on that the last 3 weeks. But that's going to be a pretty key recommendation for the town when we eventually have a town meeting.
And so, and just to kind of add a little bit more to that, Jack, is that we're also, I'm assuming we've been in contact and we're doing the 2-article kind of split on the regional school district budget, just so we're kind of on the same page about that. And I would assume your FinCom and your board will keep us abreast of any changes that happen with that amount.
We're done with that, so that we've split it. And in terms of the town override and the school override, and I doubt we're not going to change that number. Just a question of how many people will be in favor of it or not in favor of it.
All right. The next item here, I don't know if we may have already touched on this, but was the discussion of the fiscal year 21 budget. Joe, is there anything additional that you wanted to discuss, or Anthony?
I'll let Anthony speak here a second. Anthony and I and Jackie Bresnahan from Wenham and Marissa from our town hall did do a phone call with the superintendent and the finance director there. We've already started talking to them about, hey guys, just giving them a heads up. It's not that they needed it. I think everybody's well aware of the situation has changed dramatically in the last month and a half. And we just told them that we're on our town side, we're going to be looking to change our budget recommendation for FY21. We hope that they'll go back and take us another look at what they're proposing, because especially where Wenham has overrides proposed, this climate might not be the best, most inviting climate for an override. So they're aware of it. They're concerned about it just as we are. So I don't know what will come of that. They have their own process to go through. So. But they're going to be looking to protect the school district and recognize the towns are in a different position than we were 6 weeks ago.
Right.
Anthony?
And to add, what Joe and I are hearing in a lot of these meetings is a lot of communities are not really changing too much of their FY21 budgets, but are recommending that they hold off on their capital purchases. So in that meeting that Joe referenced with the superintendent, that was one thing that we had asked if our towns were going to go that route with the school, do the same thing. And I believe the superintendent's on the call, but that would have to go back to the school committee. So yeah, and plus with our budget, like Jack had mentioned, we have override questions. So our ballots are actually printed. So we'd have to reprint ballots, but it remains to see what happens with FinCom and their recommendations.
I think I would just add that obviously we're anticipating declining revenues for FY21. I've heard numbers around $5 billion. I don't know what that looks like in terms of the direct impact to Hamilton Wenham, but I mean, obviously we're tracking this closely and looking really strategically at our budgets. The other thing that folks have to keep in mind is we are providing remote learning opportunities for students right now, which means that a lot of students may not be getting the same level or quality of services they would receive if they were in our schools. That certainly is going to come at a cost to both towns. And so it feels a bit like, our hands are tied in a lot of ways because we're limited to what we can deliver in the setting, but also expecting, increases in compensatory services as we return back to school, if and when that's possible. So not super optimistic from the school's perspective, but we are doing everything that we can to look at everything from, reductions in forces to expenditures, and also doing a cost saving analysis during the closure. It's not as fruitful as folks would think or hope.
Jeff, this is Jack Willem again. I know Catherine Harrison's on. John Clemency apparently is not on, I don't think. But Catherine, do you have any comments about any of the discussion we've had in the last half hour about any of these subjects?
Well, I do. I agree that it's a good thing. I think it's great what Marissa has done, and I think that we need to continue to monitor FY20. But I guess I would have to mirror what I think I heard from some of the Hamilton folks, that if we can manage to get through the next couple of months by saving expenditures and I've said this before, and maintaining personnel, that would be my preference. For FY21, I really think we have to look again carefully, because I think someone said, maybe it was Jeff, the appetite for 2 overrides and a couple of debt exclusions may be significantly different at whatever town meeting that we have. And I know that we have the numbers printed, but I'm still interested to hear what some of our options are. But at this point, I think everyone's been pretty involved with just getting through at least in town hall, working through the remote working and the pandemic. But we're going to have to, I think, especially review FY21 and our recommendations towards that.
So, I agree with you, and I'm also wondering at the same time, what's the harm in asking, continuing to communicate the needs of the communities of the budget, and being able, we know that we can come back and after the voters have had a chance to speak. So my worry would be not presenting the voters with what the real need is, and just sort of kicking down the road as we have done for a number of years, and what's the impact long term.
So I will just mention about a statistic I read today, and it was quite sobering, that almost 50% of our business people are small businesses, and many of them, the vast majority of them, have either furloughed, and many are in dire risk of going under. And that concerns me a great deal when we talk optimistically about still continuing for some of the things that I'm not sure we can afford. And I'm wondering how much pressure that would put on people to vote for something, and the guilt of not being able to afford it. I'm just very concerned about the financial ramifications when this is over. And my thought and my hope is that we look at everything in a very conservative manner, very conservative, because we don't know where our finances are going to be. And we shouldn't be talking about sort of best case scenario. We need this and this and this. We should be talking about what are the bare bones minimum, because it's going to probably take the economy at least a year to recover, if not longer. And those statistics I heard today were very sobering and very frightening. Somebody like me, geez, I'm lucky enough to have a job, and many of us who are here still have our jobs, but there are many who don't. And so I'm trying to instill the voice of reason and compassion and practicality into this conversation.
And I appreciate your comments, and I couldn't have said it better myself. This has been one of my biggest worries since I came to Hamilton Wenham, was that if this was our situation in July 2019 during a healthy fiscal environment, what was going to happen, when we have a massive decline. And it doesn't change the needs. And again, like not funding the special ed positions that we need, not funding the programs that we need, not taking care of our facilities. these are not nice to haves. You are already at that critical inflection point. You're already like beyond your useful life in so many ways. And I'm just sort of saying this as a cautionary tale, like I get that things are going to have to go undone. It's just, this is why it's so important during healthy fiscal times that we're making those incremental investments and we're thinking really smartly about a short-term and a long-range vision of our community.
I agree with that. I just think realistically, this is not the time to kind of push a lot of things, please excuse the statement, down people's throats, because I find that very upsetting as a selectman in the town of Hamilton, knowing that a lot of people have lost their jobs and they don't know if those jobs are coming back. And I think it's unfair for us to put the pressure on things that maybe if we looked carefully, we could live without to a greater degree. Life goes on. Do you know, some of the capital items, we'll just have to live, we just have to make do with what we have. And that's the reality. And I would hope that we can adopt that philosophy in an effort to help our citizens in both Hamilton and Wenham.
This is Catherine. I think the uncertainty of it all is what's the most troubling. One of our legislators made a comment, I think, that at the state level, that there's some possibility that they would be budgeting quarterly rather than budgeting for the whole year. I don't know if that person was being seriously considered, but wow, that would be something that would be helpful, I think, because we can barely see out 3 months, let alone a year's worth of a budget for the towns or the schools. So it's a very difficult time, and we're being asked to make projections about things that have so many factors that are more unpredictable than usual by a factor of, infinity. Just a comment.
That's an interesting perspective to go quarterly. Wow.
Yeah, it'd be hard work, but
yeah.
Maybe twice, half year instead of quarterly. I don't know. That would be completely up to the legislature. I don't think legally we have the ability to do that right now. But I thought it was an interesting point.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. Does anybody from Hamilton have anything they'd like to add? Okay. Well, Wenham folks, we sure do appreciate, and everybody who's on the call. Julie, thank you for being on the call. I think it's good just to keep the lines of communication open. I think a couple of people have mentioned things are changing daily, so it's hard to make decisions for the long term, even the short term. But I think keeping the lines of communication is always healthy. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to do that tonight.
Jeff?
Yeah, Joe.
So can we just really quickly recap some of the conversations so we're all on the same page leaving?
Sure.
So there was general agreement from both boards, though no votes because we don't want to take any votes, that we'll be thinking of June 20th and June 25th to save the dates for the annual town meeting and town elections in that order. And we'll, internally, the administration, the day-to-day, the administrators, the department heads will start to work towards that goal, understanding that there could be a change based on new information or the way that this pandemic continues to evolve. Do you want to plan for Anthony and I to stay in touch? Do you want to plan for another meeting in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, another joint meeting in 2 to 4 weeks? Or do you want to just have Anthony and I manage it for you? That we're okay to do it either way. It's up to you. Just want to get some sense.
Jack Willem, I think that we should reconnoiter on the dates in about 3 weeks. I don't think much is going to change in a week to 10 days, but miracles could happen, and that it could be possible having in May, earlier the better, but probably not. But nevertheless, I don't think that we should go 5 or 6 weeks without a reconsideration of those dates.
No, I agree. I would never say go 5 or 6 weeks. And if we go 3 weeks from now, I don't think we'll be doing anything in May because we're going to need at least a month to kind of finalize everything, to post the warrant and have it advertised and the new date advertised and everything else. So I'm pleased that the superintendent's on the line. Julie, would it be possible for us to kind of tentatively just save the date for June 20th, potentially as a Hamilton Town meeting at the high school?
Yep, that sounds good. I will.
Thank you very much. We're not going to announce it. We're not going to do a press release, but we're just going to be thinking about that date and start making plans towards that date. Thank you.
On the 20th for Buca, Julie.
Gotcha.
And then in the meantime, we'll plan a meeting 3 weeks hence to do. Wenham Board, do you still want to do it on a Monday night? Do you want to ask us to come to you on a Tuesday night instead? We're all coming to each other via technology these days anyway. So.
We'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hamilton Board of Selectmen, would somebody like to make a motion, Darcy?
Yes, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Bill?
Bill Wilson? Go ahead, Bill, sorry.
Bill, you're on mute.
Uh-oh.
William
Period.
Olson, aye.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie
Carol,
Kennedy, aye.
Sorry, Rosie.
That's right.
Jeff Hubbard, aye.
Okay, unanimous on our side. Does the Hamilton Board want to do the same?
Wow.
You mean the
Just
one?
for your benefit.
You mean the Wenham Board? Yes.
Wenham Board, I meant Wenham Board, yes, sorry.
Yeah. I move that we adjourn. Catherine?
I will second that motion, Jack.
Very good. All in favor, Catherine? Aye.
Catherine,
Aye.
yes.
We're adjourned.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
all.
Be well.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good night.